On Sunday, April 1st, I dined with Johnson and Mr. Thrales, with Sir Philip Jennings, clerk, and Mr. Perkins. There's a note here that says see page 568, but I'm not going to fall for that. I'm not going to go to page 568 and be confused. I'm just going to move ahead. So, Mr. Perkins, who had the superintendence of Mr. Thrales' brewery, with a salary of £500 a year. Sounds vaguely familiar. I remember something about that brewery. I think on page 568 is like a... all right, I gotta look. I have just got to do it. What's going on page 568? They got me. It just says, yeah, okay, there was a letter to Mr. Perkins here from Johnson. And there's a footnote here from Boswell that says, Mr. Perkins was, for a number of years, the worthy superintendent of Mr. Thrales' great brewery, and after his death became one of the proprietors of it, and now resides at Mr. Thrales' house in Southwark, which was the scene of so many literary meetings, and in which he continues the liberal hospitality of which it was eminent. Dr. Johnson esteemed him much. He hung up in the counting house had fine proof of the admirable mezzo tinto of Dr. Johnson by Doughty. And when Mr. Thrale asked him somewhat flippantly, why do you put him up in the counting house? He answered, because, madame, I wish to Mrs. Thrale, he said this, because, madame, I wish to have one wise man there. Sir, said Johnson, I thank you. It is a very handsome compliment, and I believe you speak sincerely. So that was a while ago, so kind of remembered that, but not really. Anyway, sorry for that tangent. I'm just going to start this paragraph again. You can fast forward to this part. On Sunday, April 1st, I dined with Johnson and Mr. Thrales, with Sir Philip Jennings, clerk, and Mr. Perkins, who we just learned about, who had the superintendence of Mr. Thrales' brewery with a salary of £500 a year. Sir Philip had the appearance of a gentleman of ancient family, well advanced in life. He wore his own white hair in a bag of goodly size, a black velvet coat with an embroidered waistcoat, and very rich laced ruffles, which Mrs. Thrale said were old-fashioned, but which, for that reason, I thought the more respectable, more like a Tory. Yet Sir Philip was then in opposition in Parliament. Ah, sir, said Johnson, ancient ruffles and modern principles do not agree. Sir Philip defended the opposition to the American war ably and with temper, and I joined him. He said the majority of the nation was against the ministry. Johnson said, I, sir, am against the ministry, but it is not having too little of that of which opposition thinks they have too much. Were I a minister, if any man wagged his finger against me, he should be turned out. For that which is in the power of government to give at pleasure to one or to another should be given to the supporters of government. If you will not oppose at the expense of losing your place, your opposition will not be honest. You will feel no serious grievance. And the present opposition is only a contest to get what others have. Sir Robert Walpole acted as I would do. As to the American war, the sense of the nation is with the ministry. The majority of those who can understand it is with it. The majority of those who can only hear is against it. And as those who can only hear are more numerous than those who can understand, and opposition is always loudest, the majority of the rabble will be for opposition. This boisterous vivacity entertained us, but the truth is, my opinion was that those who could understand the best were against the American war, as almost every man now is, when the question has been coolly considered. Mrs. Thrale gave high praise to Mr. Dudley Long, now North. Johnson said, Nay, my dear sir, don't talk so. Mr. Long's character is very short. It is nothing. He fills a chair. He is a man of genteel appearance, and that is all. I know nobody who blasts by praise as you do. For whenever there is exaggerated praise, everybody is set against a character. There are men with such a disproportion. Oh, I'm sorry. They are provoked to attack it. Now there is Peps, or Peeps, P-E-P-Y-S. You praise that man with such disproportion that I was incited to lessen him, perhaps more than he deserves. His blood is upon your head. By the same principle, your malice defeats itself, for your censure is too violent. And yet, looking to her with a leering smile, she is the first woman in the world. Could she but restrain that wicked tongue of hers, she would be the only woman, could she but command that little whirligig. I don't know what all that means. Anyway, there's two footnotes here. One about he fills a chair. What does he say? I lost my spot. He fills a chair. He's a man of genteel appearance, and that is all. He's talking about Mr. Dudley Long. Boswell says, here Johnson condescended to play upon the words long and short, but little did he know that, owing to Mr. Long's reserve in his presence, he was talking thus of a gentleman's distinguished amongst his acquaintance for acuteness of wit, one to whom I think the French expression le petit d'esprit is particularly suited. He has gratified me by mentioning that he heard Dr. Johnson say, sir, if I were to lose Boswell, it would be a limb amputated. And then there's one about Pepys or Peps. William Weller Pepys, Esquire, one of the masters of the High Court of Chancery and well known in polite circles. My acquaintance with him is not sufficient to enable me to him from my own judgment, but I know that both at Eton and Oxford he was the intimate friend of the late Sir James Macdonald, the Marcellus in Scotland, whose extraordinary talents, learning, and virtues will ever be remembered with admiration and regret. Why regret, I wonder? I wonder what regret means in that context. Anyway, let's go on. Upon the subject of exaggerated praise, I took the liberty to say that I thought there might be very high praise given to a known character which deserved it, and therefore would not be exaggerated. What do you think he's talking about, Johnson? Thus, one might say of Mr. Edmund Burke, he is a very wonderful man. Johnson said, no, sir, you would not be safe. If another man had a mind purposely to contradict, he might answer, where is all the wonder? Burke is, to be sure, a man of uncommon abilities, with a great quantity of matter in his mind and a great fluency of language in his mouth, but we are not to be stunned and astonished by him. So you see, sir, even Burke would suffer, not from any fault of his own, but from your folly. Mrs. Thrale mentioned a gentleman, Charles Selwyn, who had acquired a fortune of 4,000 a year in trade, but was absolutely miserable because he could not talk in company. So miserable that he was impelled to lament his situation in the street to William Seward, who he hates and who he knows despises him. I am a most unhappy man, said he. I am invited to conversations. I go to conversations, but alas, I have no conversation. Johnson said, man commonly cannot be successful in different ways. This gentleman has spent in getting £4,000 a year the time in which he might have learned to talk, and now he cannot talk. Mr. Perkins made a shrewd and droll remark. If he had got his 4,000 a year as a mountebank, he might have learned to talk at the same time that he was getting his fortune. Some other gentlemen, Seward, Sir John Lade, and Henry Smith, came in. The conversation concerning the person whose character Dr. Johnson had treated so slightingly as he did not know his merit was resumed. Mrs. Thrale said, you think so of him, sir, because he is quiet and does not exert himself with force. You'll be saying the same thing of Mr. Henry Smith there, who sits as quiet. This was not well bred, and Johnson did not let it pass without correction. Nay, madame, what right have you to talk thus? Both Mr. Smith and I have reason to talk to take it ill. You may talk so of Mr. Smith, but why do you make me do it? Have I said anything against Mr. Smith? You have said him that I might shoot him, but I have not shot him. One of the gentlemen, William Seward, said he had seen 3 folio volumes of Dr. Johnson's sayings collected by me. I must put you right, sir, said I, for I am very exact in authenticity. You could not see folio volumes, for I have none. You might have seen some in quarto and octavo. This is inattention which one should guard against. Johnson said, Sir, it is a want of concern about veracity. He does not know that he saw any volumes. If he had seen them, he could have remembered their size. Mr. Thrale appeared very lethargic today. I saw him again on Monday evening, at which time he was not thought to be in immediate danger. But early in the morning of Wednesday the 4th, he expired. Damn. That's today, actually, isn't it? Huh. So in 1781, how many... Don't make me do the math, but it's a while ago. On this day, Mr. Thrale expired. A moment of silence. I liked him. He was a good character. Johnson was in the house, and thus mentioned the event. I felt almost the last flutter of his pulse, and looked for the last time upon the face that for 15 years had never been turned upon me but with respect and benignity. Upon that day there was a call of the Literary Club, but Johnson apologized for his absence by the following note. Mr. Johnson knows that Sir Joshua Reynolds and the other gentlemen will excuse his incompliance with the call when they are told that Mr. Thrale died this morning, Wednesday. Mr. Thrale's death was a very essential loss to Johnson, who, although he did not foresee all that afterwards happened, was sufficiently convinced that the comforts which Mr. Thrale's family afforded him would now in a great measure cease. He, however, continued to show a kind attention to his widow and children as long as it was acceptable, and he took upon him with a very earnest concern the office of one of his executors, the importance of which seemed greater than usual to him, from his circumstances having been always such that he had scarcely any share in the real business of life. His friends of the club were in hopes that Mr. Thrale might have made a liberal provision for him for his life, which, as Mr. Thrale left no son and a very large fortune, it would have been highly in his honor to have done. And considering Dr. Johnson's age, could not have been a law of long duration. But he bequeathed him only £200, which was the legacy given to each of his executors. I could not but be somewhat diverted by hearing Johnson talk in a pompous manner of his new office, and particularly of the concerns of the brewery, which it was at last resolved should be sold. Lord Lucan tells a very good story, which, if not precisely exact, is certainly characteristical, that when the sale of Thrale's brewery was going forward, Johnson appeared bustling about with an inkhorn and pen in his buttonhole like an excise man, and on being asked what he really considered to be the value of the property which was to be disposed of, answered, "We are not here to sell a parcel of boilers and vats, but the potentiality of growing rich beyond the dreams of avarice." On Friday, April 6th, he carried me to dine at a club, which, at his desire, had been lately formed at the Queen's Arms in St. Paul's Churchyard. He told Mr. Hoole that he wished to have a city club and asked him to collect one. But, said he, don't let them be patriots. The company today were very sensible, well-behaved men. I have preserved only 2 particulars of his conversation. He said he was glad Lord George Gordon had escaped rather than that a precedent should be established for hanging a man for constructive treason, which, in consistency with his true manly constitutional Toryism, he considered would be a dangerous engine of arbitrary power. and upon its being mentioned that an opulent and very indolent Scotch nobleman, who totally resigned the management of his affairs to a man of knowledge and abilities, had claimed some merit by saying, "The next best thing to managing a man's own affairs well is being sensible of incapacity and not attempting it, but having full confidence in one who can do it." Johnson said, "Nay, sir, that is paltry. There is a middle course. Let a man give application, and depend upon it he will soon get above a despicable state of helplessness and attain the power of acting for himself." I don't know about that, Johnson. On Saturday, April 7th, I dined with Johnson at Mr. Hoole's, with Governor Bouchier and Captain Orme, both of whom had been long in the East Indies, and being men of good sense and observation, were very entertaining. Johnson defended the Oriental regulation of different castes of men, which was objected to as totally destructive of the hopes of rising in society by personal merit. These guys are to talk, huh? He showed that there was a principle in it sufficiently plausible by analogy. "We see," said Johnson, "in metals that there are different species, and so likewise in animals, though one species may not differ very widely from another, as in the species of dogs, the cur, the spaniel, the mastiff. The Brahmins are the mastiffs of mankind." On Thursday, April 12th, I dined with Johnson at a bishop's, Porteous of Chester, where were Sir Joshua Reynolds, Mr. Beringer, and some more company. He had dined the day before at another bishop's, Shipley of St. Asaph. I have unfortunately recorded none of his conversation at the bishop's where we dined together, but I preserved his ingenious defense of his dining twice abroad in Passion Week, a laxity in which I am convinced he would not have indulged himself at the time when he wrote his solemn paper in the Rambler upon that awful season. It appeared to me that by being much more in company and enjoying more luxurious living, he had contracted a keener relish of pleasure, and was consequently less rigorous in his religious rites. This he would not acknowledge, but he reasoned with admirable sophistry as follows: "Why, sir, a bishop calling company together in this week is, to use the vulgar phrase, not the thing. But you must consider laxity as a bad thing. But preciseness is always a bad thing, and your general character may be more hurt by preciseness than by dining with a bishop in Passion Week. There might be a handle for reflection. It might be said, he refused to dine with a bishop in Passion Week, but was 3 Sundays absent from church." I said, "Very true, sir. But suppose a man to be uniformly of good conduct, would it not be better that he should refuse to dine with a bishop in this week, and so not encourage a bad practice by his example?" Johnson said, "Why, sir, you are to consider whether you might not do more harm by lessening the influence of a bishop's character by your disapprobation in refusing him than by going to him." An hour later, to Mrs. Lucy Porter in Lichfield. Is that his? That might be his stepdaughter, isn't it? I can't remember. I should know these things by now, right? "Dear Madame, life is full of troubles. I have just lost my dear friend Thrale. I hope he is happy, but I have had a great loss. I am otherwise pretty well. I require some care of myself, but that care is not ineffectual, and when I am out of order, I think it often my own fault. The spring is now making quick advances. As it is the season in which the whole world is enlivened and invigorated, I hope that both you and I shall partake of its benefits. My desire is to see Lichfield, but being left executor to my friend, I know not whether I can be spared. But I will try, for it is now long since we saw one another, and how little we can promise ourselves many more interviews. We are taught by hourly examples of mortality. Let us try to live so as that mortality may not be an evil. Write to me soon, my dearest. Your letter will give me great pleasure. I am sorry that Mr. Porter has not had his box, but by sending it to Mr. Matthias, who very readily undertook its conveyance, I did the best I could, and perhaps before now he has it. Be so kind as to make my compliments to my friends. I have a great value for their kindness and hope to enjoy it before summer is past. Do write to me. I am, dear love, your most humble servant, Sam Johnson. London, April 12th, 1781. Well, that's a good Easter reading for today. Until next time, bye from Boswell.